Look at an endgame study. This is the starting position with white to move. You can see that black is ready to promote to two new queens on the G and H files. White has extra material, a bishop and a knight, but black's pawns look really dangerous. Now you can see that there is a winning white to move wins the queen immediately with a check at c3. And then, so if white decides to win the queen through knight c3 check and then wins the queen, it's not a problem for black because he gets a new queen in the next move and that queen comes with check. So black gets some counterplay by letting go of the queen. In this study, we'll see how white does not take the queen and then forces black into the corner and then mates and does not allow the promotion of any of the pawns. So he starts with knight c3 check, and knight d6 would be a mistake because if you go knight d6 then c d6, bishop c6 check, king f5, and bishop d7 check, king e4, and white cannot make much progress because eventually black king will come closer to the pawns and he'll promote, and black lost a knight for nothing. So, and these pawns on the center are also can also shield white king in some instance. So knight d6 is not the move, knight c3 is the move. And then black has two choices, king f4 or king f5. Certainly not king d4 because the queen and the bishop and the knight can mate within this vicinity. So the king has to run away from the queen. So let's see what happens with king f5. The king f4 is the right move, but let's see what happens if we go king f5. If king f5, then bishop d7 check, king f4 eventually, and then queen a4 check, not taking the queen yet, just improving the position. King g3, queen g4 check, the pawn comes in handy here. King f2, queen e2 check, king g1. So if the king goes to g3, then the queen repeats and even tries to mate at h3. So the king has to go to g1, and then queen e3 check. Then the king has to go to the corner because the knight is eventually threatening to come at e2 with a check. So the king has to go king h1, and now comes bishop c6, pinning this pawn, and also threatening mate at g2 when the queen comes there. So black has to defend g1. He has no other alternatives. He can't give any checks. The queen is also hanging. So the best thing that black can do is trade queens. So queen g1, but white goes queen e2, not trading queens, of course. Queen e2. Now the threat is that if the black queen ever leaves g1, then it's mate. And now you can see the box. Both the king and the queen are blocking their own pawns, and eventually black will run out of moves. So he has to make a pawn move. So black is kind of a zugzwang here. So black has to make a pawn move here, e4. Then the knight simply takes the e4 pawn and now threatens to come at f2 with a smothered mate idea. But this e4 move actually did something. It cleared this diagonal, this a1 g7 diagonal. So now the black queen can jump in with some checks, but it doesn't help. We'll see that. Queen d4 check, king h6, queen g7 check. Okay, I mean, what's the point of queen g7? The point of queen g7 is that black has no moves. He has to make a move. So if the king takes, then black gets a chance with promotion and giving a check. But that doesn't work here because if king g7 and then if you promote to a queen with check, then comes knight g3 mate. It's a double check, also covers the check, and it's a mate. So there's no point in giving a check here, queen g7, because it doesn't help. What else black can do here? There's nothing to do. You have to guard knight f2 mate, or knight f2 followed by bishop, the queen and bishop coming in g7. So this line doesn't work for black. So he has to go king f4. So if he goes king f4, then comes knight e2 check, not taking the queen, because it doesn't help if we take the queen. Black just promotes with a new queen and gives a check. and gets counterplay. So we don't want to take the queen yet. King g4 and bishop d7 check, not caring about this pawn. So because if black takes this pawn, we check with a check, and we are eventually cornering the king and then mating at g4. So king bishop d7 check, and then king f3, bishop c6 check, giving up the knight, so to put the king in the corner. So giving up the knight here. Then comes king e2, then comes queen e5 check. Now we take the pawn, and then comes king f1. All these squares are taken. This is taken by the bishop, this is taken by the queen. So you can't go here because then so the you can't take this pawn because the bishop is eyeing here. So the king has to go f1, queen f4 check, king g1. Eventually the king is being coaxed into the box. Queen e3 check, and then comes king h1 and queen e2. So now eventually this forces white queen to go to g1 to protect mate, and you can't even promote because of the bishop here. Now comes queen g1, the only reply. Oops, yeah, queen g, and now the king comes in. The king just starts improving. There is nothing black can do now. Black cannot move the king, black cannot move the queen. Black has only one pawn is blocked. Only this pawn has to move. So the king moves over h6, and then comes bishop f3. The point of this move is to allow black some moves with this c pawn, because if the bishop doesn't move, then it would be black may go for stalemate ideas. So not allowing any stalemate ideas. So bishop f3, c6, the king comes over, king e7, queen c5 check, not minding this check because the black queen can't do anything alone. So the king goes to e8, and then the queen has to come back. I mean, it can't just give checks randomly. The queen has to come back to defend mate. And then the king comes over again. And then black understands that there is no point of giving checks with the queen. And here the black queen cannot even give checks because the white king is on a light square. So he has to make a pawn move. Now the king comes over in the light square. c4. The king again comes in a light square so that the black queen can't give any checks. And then comes c3, the only move. Then the king comes over to e4. The black is completely boxed in here. Now the queen goes to f2. So if the queen can't be taken, because if you take the queen, then it's stalemate, right? So queen d1, not falling for that. Queen g1 blocking, and then bishop g2 check. The queen can't take because it's pinned, so the king has to take, and then comes queen f3 mate. So now you see the point of bringing the king over, because white had the idea of sacrificing the bishop and then creating a just only diagonal where the black king can be mated while the queen is being supported by the king. I hope you like the study.